Elon Musk gives up his train seat to a pregnant woman. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. The air was heavy with a mix of anticipation and routine as Elon Musk, dressed casually in jeans and a simple hoodie, waited for the subway. Despite being one of the most recognizable faces in the world, he enjoyed blending into the crowd when he could. Today was different. It was his son's school event, and he had promised to be there on time. As the train arrived, Elon slipped into the bustling car, finding a small spot to stand by the door. His mind wandered to his promise and how much it meant to his son. Across from him, a young woman, visibly pregnant and struggling to balance herself with an oversized bag, caught his eye. Her face was pale, and beads of sweat glistened on her forehead. Without hesitation, Elon offered his seat. "Please take this. You need it more than I do," he said, his voice calm yet insistent. The woman hesitated, clearly embarrassed, but eventually nodded and sank into the seat with a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the train's hum. Elon stepped back toward the door, holding onto the overhead rail as the train lurched forward. He glanced at his watch, calculating whether he would make it on time. For a moment, a sense of quiet satisfaction washed over him. Helping someone always felt right. Then, everything changed. The woman suddenly slumped forward, her bag slipping to the floor. Gasps erupted around the car as she collapsed onto her knees, clutching her stomach. Panic spread like wildfire. "Someone help her!" a man shouted. Elon was already moving toward her, instinctively trying to assist. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, crouching down beside her. Before anyone could react further, she pointed a trembling finger at him, her voice weak but sharp. It was him. He did something." Elon froze. Her words sent a ripple of shock through the crowded train. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with disbelief. "I just gave you my seat." Whispers began spreading through the car. Passengers exchanged wary glances, the atmosphere thick with suspicion. Elon felt the weight of every gaze turning on him. "Call the police!" someone yelled from the back. Elon stood up slowly, his hands raised in defense. "I didn't do anything," he said firmly, though his voice carried the frustration of someone being misunderstood. The crowd wasn't convinced, and the tension only grew as the train screeched to a halt at the next station. As the train doors slid open, 2 transit officers stepped inside, their expressions stern as they surveyed the scene. The pregnant woman, now seated on the floor and cradling her stomach, pointed weakly toward Elon again. "It was him," she murmured, her voice barely audible but sharp enough to pierce through the murmurs of the onlookers. One of the officers approached Elon, his hand resting lightly on his belt. "Sir, step off the train with us. We need to sort this out." Elon remained calm, though his mind raced. The absurdity of the situation was overwhelming, but he knew he had to stay composed. "I didn't do anything. I gave her my seat because she looked unwell. That's all," he said, his tone even but firm. He could feel the eyes of the passengers boring into him, some skeptical, others clearly convinced of his innocence but too scared to speak up. "Please step off," the officer repeated, this time with more authority. Elon nodded and followed them onto the platform, aware of the whispers and stares following his every move. A small crowd had gathered around the scene, passengers spilling out of the car to watch the drama unfold. As the officers began asking Elon questions, the woman's accusations grew louder. "He was standing so close to me," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I felt dizzy after he leaned toward me. He must have done something." Elon shook his head, incredulous. "That's not true. I stood by the door the whole time after giving her my seat. Check the security cameras if you don't believe me," he insisted, his frustration beginning to seep into his voice. The taller officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "We'll get to that," he said dismissively. "For now, we need to gather accounts." The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, passengers offering fragmented and contradictory versions of what they thought had happened. "I saw him standing close to her," one man in a business suit volunteered. "It was odd." Another woman added, "He gave up his seat, but I noticed him watching her afterward. I don't know. It just felt off." Elon clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to lash out. This wasn't the first time he'd faced baseless accusations, but this felt personal, invasive. He scanned the crowd, his gaze landing on a teenage girl clutching her phone tightly. She looked hesitant, then stepped forward. "Wait," she said loudly, her voice cutting through the noise. "I recorded part of this on my phone. He didn't do anything wrong. I was making a TikTok and caught everything. He just gave her his seat and stood by the door." The officers turned to her, their expressions shifting slightly. "Can we see the video?" one asked. The girl nodded and handed over her phone. The tension in the air was palpable as the officers watched the clip. Elon's actions were clear, standing at a respectful distance, minding his own business. Relief washed over him as the officers handed the phone back to the girl. "This doesn't show any inappropriate behavior," the taller officer admitted. But just as Elon thought the nightmare was ending, the pregnant woman doubled down. "He must have done something before the video started," she insisted, her voice trembling. "I felt it." Elon felt his heart sink. The truth was out there, but would it be enough? The platform buzzed with unease as the officers turned back to Elon. "We'll need to review the train's security footage to confirm everything," the taller officer said, his tone clipped. "Until then, stay here." Elon crossed his arms, his frustration bubbling under the surface. "Fine, but this is ridiculous. I'm telling the truth," he said firmly, his eyes scanning the crowd. Most passengers avoided his gaze, but the teenage girl who had spoken up earlier stayed nearby, her phone still in hand, as if ready to defend him again if needed. Meanwhile, the pregnant woman was seated on a bench, her breathing uneven as paramedics arrived to check on her. "Her blood pressure is dangerously low," one paramedic said, glancing up at the officers. "That could explain the dizziness and confusion." The officers exchanged a look, but the weight of the accusation still hung heavy in the air. The murmurs from the crowd hadn't entirely subsided. "Low blood pressure doesn't mean she's wrong," one woman whispered loudly enough for Elon to hear. Another man muttered, "He's just acting too defensive. It's suspicious." Elon took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay calm. His father's advice echoed in his mind. "Don't let them rattle you. Stay composed. The truth will come out." Moments later, one of the officers returned from the train with news. "The security footage corroborates his story," he announced. "There's no evidence of any contact between him and the woman beyond him giving up his seat." A hush fell over the platform. Some passengers visibly relaxed, their suspicions dissipating, but others looked unconvinced. The pregnant woman, now visibly shaken, stammered, I don't know. I just felt something when he was near me. I was sure." Elon turned to her, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "You assumed," he said pointedly, "and because of that assumption I've been treated like a criminal for helping you." Her face crumpled with guilt, and she looked away. The taller officer stepped forward, addressing Elon. "You're free to go. This appears to have been a misunderstanding," he said, though the lack of an apology in his tone stung. "A misunderstanding?" Elon repeated, incredulous. "Do you have any idea how damaging your assumptions have been? To have an entire train of people treat you like a threat for doing nothing wrong? This isn't just a misunderstanding. It's a failure to trust, to think before judging." The officer looked uncomfortable but didn't respond. Instead, he gestured for the crowd to disperse. Slowly, passengers began to leave, their whispers fading into the background. The teenage girl lingered for a moment, catching Elon's eye. "I'm sorry this happened," she said softly. "I posted the video. People need to see what really happened." Elon managed a faint smile. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Your courage to speak up made a difference." As the girl walked away, Elon took a deep breath. The platform was nearly empty now, but the weight of the experience still pressed heavily on him. He glanced at his watch. The delay meant he would miss most of his son's event. The thought stung, but he reminded himself that standing up for what's right was just as important. Elon leaned against a steel pillar, the noise of the dispersing crowd fading into the background. He pulled out his phone, hesitating as he typed a message to his son. "I might be late, but I'll explain everything when I get there. I'm so sorry, buddy." Just as he hit send, the teenage girl who had defended him earlier returned. "Hey," she said cautiously, holding out her phone again. "The video is already going viral. People are supporting you." Elon raised an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and apprehension washing over him. "Viral?" he asked, taking the phone. On the screen was her TikTok post, captioned, "Kindness turned into suspicion, but the truth always comes out." The comments flooded in with messages of support. "He didn't deserve that. Shame on those who judged without evidence. Elon Musk helping someone and this is what he gets?" Elon handed the phone back, nodding thoughtfully. "Thanks for doing that. Maybe it'll make people think twice before jumping to conclusions." The girl smiled. "I hope so. It's crazy how quickly people assume the worst." As she left, Elon noticed the officers still lingering nearby. Their presence a stark reminder of how close this situation had come to spiraling further out of control. One of them approached him again, awkwardly clearing his throat. "Look, Mr. Musk," he began, clearly trying to smooth things over. "We were just doing our job. No hard feelings, right?" Elon gave him a long, measured look. "You call this just doing your job? Treating someone like a suspect without evidence? That's the problem. Assuming guilt instead of seeking the truth. It's not about hard feelings, it's about accountability." The officer looked away, clearly uncomfortable, before muttering a quick, "Take care," and walking off. Elon sighed deeply, the frustration still simmering but tempered by the knowledge that the truth had prevailed, at least in this instance. He took another deep breath and decided to board the next train. The ride was quiet, passengers casting occasional glances his way, some recognizing him, others simply sensing the tension he carried. By the time he arrived at his destination, the weight of the ordeal still lingered, but he was determined not to let it ruin his evening. As he stepped into the school auditorium, his son ran up to him, his face lighting up with excitement. "Dad, you made it," he exclaimed, throwing his arms around Elon. Elon smiled, kneeling to hug him tightly. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, buddy," he said. His son didn't need to know the details of what had happened, at least not tonight. This was his moment, and Elon was here for it. Later that night after the event, Elon sat in his study reflecting on the events of the day. The noise of the city outside was a constant hum, but inside, the house was peaceful. His son's laughter from earlier still echoed in his mind, a reminder of what truly mattered. But the day's ordeal was a weight he couldn't shake off. He opened his laptop and navigated to the viral TikTok video. It had amassed millions of views, with comments ranging from outrage at the woman's baseless accusation to praise for Elon's composure. The teenage girl's efforts had turned an otherwise humiliating situation into a lesson for millions. One comment stood out to him. "This story reminds us how quick we are to judge, and how rare it is for someone to stay calm and kind under pressure. Kudos to Elon for standing his ground." He stared at the words for a moment, letting them sink in. This wasn't just about him. It was about how society functioned, how kindness was often met with suspicion, and how assumptions could destroy trust in an instant. Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. What if this story could inspire more than just a fleeting moment of reflection? What if it could lead to real change? He picked up his phone and made a note. Launch a campaign for empathy and understanding. Break the cycle of assumptions. That night, Elon drafted a message to share his experience. It wasn't about pointing fingers or seeking sympathy. It was about showing how small acts of kindness could ripple into something much bigger, even in the face of doubt. He ended the post with a challenge. Before you judge, ask yourself, do I know the full story? If we all take that moment to pause, the world might just become a kinder place. As he hit send, he felt a sense of resolve. The day had been chaotic and unjust, but it had also sparked something meaningful. Sometimes even the most uncomfortable moments had the potential to create change. If you like this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content that challenges assumptions, inspires kindness, and makes you think about the world in new ways. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that matters.